Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something pretty interesting today, the Jones Act, and specifically how it affects Puerto Rico.
Okay.
We've got some research here from, well, two very different perspectives.
Right.
The American Maritime Partnership, they're big on the Jones Act.
Right.
But then we've also got stuff from the Cato Institute, and they've got a different take on it. So
Yeah.
we're going to try to figure out how it all plays out, in terms of cost of living, what happened after Hurricane Maria, all that.
Right.
So let's jump right in.
Yeah, I think to understand this, we really have to go back, way back.
Okay.
Like 1920.
Oh, wow.
Over 100 years.
Wow.
This act, the idea was to really give the U.S. shipping industry a boost.
Okay.
Especially after World War I, making sure we could move troops and supplies
Yeah.
if anything ever happened again.
Right. So it's 1920. Things are still a little shaky. Shipping is super important.
Oh, absolutely.
And this Jones Act comes along and says, basically, if you're moving anything between U.S. ports, got to be on a U.S. ship. U.S. built, owned, the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
Okay. I can see how that makes sense back then. But today, it's a different world, right?
Totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Container ships, global supply chains, stuff they couldn't even imagine back in the 1920s.
Exactly. And especially for Puerto Rico, they rely on shipping for basically everything.
Yeah, it's a big question whether those old rules still work.
So let's see what these reports say about how it's all shaking out today.
All right.
All right, so this AMP report, the American Maritime Partnership, they make a pretty strong argument about the Jones Act actually being good for the economy in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
They say it supports over 1,000 jobs there and pumps over $250 million into the island's economy, like, every year. Which, at first glance, sounds like a good reason to keep things as they are.
It does. But, the Cato Institute, they kind of flip that on its head.
Really?
They're saying, sure, there's some direct benefits, but we got to look at the indirect costs, too.
Okay.
Their argument is the Jones Act, it actually makes shipping more expensive, which means, everything costs more for the people living there.
So like a hidden tax almost?
Yeah, pretty much. They call it indirect costs. And they're saying, look, because you have to use these U.S. ships, it just costs more to ship anything there compared to using ships from other countries. And who ends up paying for that?
Right, the businesses and the people in Puerto Rico.
Exactly. Think about it. Shipping food, clothes, building materials, anything. If the shipping's expensive, it's going to show up in the prices, at the store on people's bills.
Right, and this is where Cato really hits you with the big number. They say, get this, that the Jones Act has cost Puerto Rico's economy $17 billion. $17 billion from 1990 to 2010.
What?
That's more than Hurricane Maria. How do they come up with a number like that?
Well, they look at the big picture. Not just prices at the store, but like businesses. Are they investing less? Because everything costs more.
Right.
And are companies in Puerto Rico less competitive because they have to pay these higher shipping costs, both for their supplies and then to sell their stuff?
Makes sense.
So all that adds up, they say, to that huge $17 billion figure.
So Cato's painting a pretty, I guess, a pretty negative picture.
Yeah.
But then you've got the AMP, and they're saying, no, the Jones Act is good for the economy. They even did a study comparing prices at Walmart in San Juan and Jacksonville, Florida. And you know what? A can of soup cost basically the same in both places.
A can of soup, huh?
Yeah. So who's right?
Well, it is interesting they picked a can of soup.
Yeah.
Because they break it down and show that, yeah, shipping that can of soup is only like 2% of the price on the shelf.
Okay, but Cato's not just talking about soup.
Right. They're saying the whole economy's affected, jobs, investments, the whole thing. It's about more than just one can of soup.
So we've got these two groups, and they're both looking at the same thing, but coming to very different conclusions.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It feels like there's more to this story.
There is.
Like we're missing a piece or two.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember both these reports are trying to make a point.
Okay.
The AMP, they want to show how great the Jones Act is.
Right.
Cato's trying to expose the problems. And both of them are they're picking the data and the examples that help their case.
So it's up to us to kind of figure out what's what.
Yeah, to look at both sides and try to get the full picture.
All right, so let's try to break it down a bit more. Let's start with shipping cost. What's the real story there?
Okay.
Because the AMP says, actually, Jones Act shipping rates haven't gone up that much, since 2000. And they're competitive with trucking even. They have data to back that up, too.
Right. And they do have a point about how, within the Jones Act system, the shipping rates have been pretty steady. But But Cato, they do something different. They compare shipping to Puerto Rico with shipping to other islands nearby.
Okay.
But islands that aren't part of the U.S., so they don't have the Jones Act. And guess what? The prices are way different.
Really?
Yeah. So they're saying that's proof the Jones Act is making things cost more for Puerto Rico. And if you let ships from other countries compete, the prices would drop.
So it's all about how you measure things, right?
It is.
Different comparisons, different conclusions. It's a bit of a rabbit hole.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to see these different ways of looking at the data because that helps us understand why these two reports have such different ideas. And it also shows how important it is to, really think about what we're reading and not just take things at face value.
Yeah, look beyond the headlines.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's keep going down this rabbit hole and see what else we can uncover.
Sounds good to me.
So we've seen how this whole Jones Act thing plays out, with shipping costs and the economy. But what about something more, tangible, I guess, like Hurricane Maria? This is where things get really, interesting and maybe a bit emotional, too.
Right.
Because this AMP report, they really emphasize how the Jones Act carriers, the shipping companies, they were actually heroes after Maria. Bringing supplies, logistics, even helping people directly. It's a good story, right? Yeah. Shows how important it is to have a strong American shipping industry.
Yeah, there's no doubt those companies, they did a lot to help. But the Cato Institute, they ask a tough question. Did the Jones Act itself actually make things worse?
Wait, so the law that's supposed to, make sure we're ready for emergencies might have actually slowed things down? How does that even work?
Well, they say because of the restrictions on which ships can help. Only U.S.-built, owned crew, to remember. It meant there just weren't enough ships available to get aid to Puerto Rico quickly.
Oh, I see.
They even have examples of ships from other countries ready to go, full of supplies, but they were delayed because they didn't meet the Jones Act rules. And there were ships that could only take partial loads because of the restrictions.
Yeah. So
they had to make more trips back and forth, which, Cato says that just made everything worse for the people there.
It's kind of hard to think about, If this law that's supposed to help us in emergencies actually made things harder, then, maybe it's not working the way it should.
Right. It brings up that question again. Is the Jones Act really doing what it's supposed to be doing?
This whole conversation is really making me think about, everything we thought we knew about the Jones Act. It's definitely not simple. There are no easy answers here. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that the Jones Act isn't working for Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Then what? Do we just get rid of it completely? Or are there other, better solutions out there?
That's the big question. And a lot of people, they see it as just two choices, get rid of it or keep it. But there are actually a lot of options in between those two extremes, from small changes to, some pretty big overhauls.
So what are some of the ideas people are talking about?
Well, one idea that's getting some attention is basically making the Jones Act not apply to places like Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico.
So a special exemption.
Exactly. Because those are places that really depend on shipping. And the Jones Act, it hits them harder when it comes to cost of living and stuff.
So basically, it'd be like saying, okay, for trade between these places and the mainland, the Jones Act doesn't apply.
Right. It acknowledges that these places are different. And it could be a way to give them some relief economically. Plus, it could be like a test run,
Right. See how things work without the Jones Act.
Exactly. If prices go down, investments go up, things get better, then maybe it could lead to bigger changes later on.
It's a good idea. Are there other options people are thinking about?
Yeah. Another one is, remember how one of the big problems is that ships have to be built in the U.S.?
Yeah.
What if we relaxed that rule, allowed ships built in other countries to be used?
But wouldn't that hurt U.S. shipyards?
It's a worry, for sure. But honestly, the U.S. shipbuilding industry, it's not what it used to be. A lot of what they do now is for the military.
Oh, right.
It's not really meeting the needs of, regular businesses and shipping stuff around the country the way it was supposed to.
So maybe if we let in these cheaper ships from other places, then the U.S. shipyards, they could focus on the stuff they're good at, like warships and fancy tankers and things.
Right, exactly. And, a lot of European shipyards, they've had to adapt because of global competition. They focus on these, special types of ships where they can be the best.
Yeah.
Maybe the U.S. could do something similar.
Become more competitive by focusing on what they do best. So we've got exemptions for some areas and maybe changing the rules about where ships are built. Anything else?
Yeah. Even if we don't make those big changes, there are still things we can do to make the current system work better.
Okay.
Like the waiver process. Sometimes companies can get a waiver from the Jones Act rules. but it's a mess, really confusing, and you never know if you're going to get one or not.
So it's basically a big headache for businesses.
Yeah, it makes things unpredictable, discourages investment, causes delays. So if we made that process easier, more transparent, so companies knew what to expect, that could help.
Right. Less red tape, potentially lower costs. It's a good idea. And, going back to what we were talking about before, the AMP report talked about how important the Jones Act ships were after Hurricane Maria.
Yeah.
All those ships bringing in aid, it was a good image.
But imagine if there were even more ships that could help.
Right.
If we relaxed the Jones Act rules, even a little, there would be more ships available from other countries and U.S. ships too, maybe.
Yeah.
All working together to get things to the people who need them faster.
It's almost like the opposite of what you'd think.
I know, right?
The Jones Act is meant to make us stronger in emergencies, but maybe it actually did the opposite.
Exactly. And that just shows how we need to really think about this, Not just hold on to old ideas, but look at the Jones Act with fresh eyes and see how it needs to change to fit the world today.
So we've got some potential solutions: exemptions, changing the rules about ships, fixing the waiver process. But, realistically, this is big stuff.
It is.
And there are powerful groups out there who, they like things the way they are. What are the chances any of this actually happens?
It's true. There's a lot of pushback against changing the Jones Act. It's one of those situations where a small group of people benefit a lot from the way things are.
Like the shipbuilders, the unions.
Right. They're organized, they have influence, and they're going to fight hard to keep the Jones Act as it is. And on the other side, the people who are hurt by the Jones Act, well, it's a lot of people, but it's spread out. It's hard to get them all together to push for change.
So it's an uphill battle, but not impossible.
Right. And I think the key is people need to understand what's going on.
Right. Awareness.
Yeah. The more people know about the hidden costs of the Jones Act and how it affects them, the more likely they are to, demand change.
And that's where you, the listener, come in, learn about this, talk about it, let your voice be heard. You can be part of making things better.
Okay, so we've been through a lot with this Jones Act stuff. The history, the economics, the arguments for and against changing it, even how it played out with Hurricane Maria. It's definitely been an eye-opener.
It has. And I think what really stands out to me is just how complicated this all is.
Yeah.
It's not like some things where it's just good guys, bad guys, clear cut. There are good arguments on both sides.
It's easy to get lost in all the numbers and the economic stuff.
Right.
But we got to remember, this is about real people.
Absolutely.
Their lives, their businesses, the whole island of Puerto Rico. It's not just an abstract debate. And that's why I think we need to, move past this idea that it's either get rid of the Jones Act completely or do nothing.
Right. Like there's no middle ground.
There has to be a better way,
So you've mentioned a few possibilities: exemptions, changing the shipbuilding rules. Is there anything else out there that could maybe address the problems without just blowing up the whole system?
There are a couple of other ideas that are, worth thinking about. One is, instead of getting rid of the Jones Act, what if we, upgraded the ships?
Upgrade it.
Yeah, modernize the fleet, newer ships, more fuel efficient, using the latest technology. That could bring down the costs, make them more competitive.
So kind of beat the competition by being better.
Exactly. Of
Yeah.
course, new ships are expensive, so there's the question of who pays for that.
Right. Always the money question. But it is interesting to think about how tech could change things.
Yeah.
Look at how much technology has changed other industries. Maybe there's a way to do something similar with shipping.
Another idea is, we know the Jones Act makes things more expensive in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah.
So what if we had a special fund to help cover those extra costs?
So like a subsidy or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It would be a way to acknowledge that, the Jones Act is a burden, but without getting rid of it entirely. Of course, then you'd have to figure out who runs this fund, where does the money come from, will it actually work?
Seems like every solution comes with a whole new set of problems.
It does. It's a tough situation.
Yeah. But that's why talking about it is so important. We have to keep looking at these ideas, figure out what works, what doesn't, and have honest conversations about how to move forward.
Exactly.
And for everyone listening, the big takeaway is don't just take things at face value. Don't just believe the headlines.
Right.
Do your own research, ask questions, think for yourself.
The Jones Act. It's complicated. Its impact on Puerto Rico, that's complicated too. There's no easy solution. But if we talk about it, consider all sides, we can hopefully find a way to make things better for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.